A man, while exploring, was unexpectedly bitten by a venomous snake. He tried to endure the pain and grabbed his phone to call for help. But the feeling of paralysis spreading through his body caused him to drop the phone accidentally. Ish immediately pulled out a small knife, cut the bite wound, and tried to suck out the venom. Without time to pick up the phone, he stumbled back home. Little did he know that this incident would inadvertently save his life. Rushing into his house in a panic, Ish downs a bottle of clear liquor and then collapses onto his bed. Safe from the dangers of the wild, he keeps muttering to himself, reminding himself not to forget to breathe. As his heart rate skyrockets, he quickly falls unconscious, his body starting to convulse uncontrollably. The next morning, Ish wakes up to find his hand swollen like a huge dumpling. Luckily, he's still alive. As night falls again, in a daze, Ish senses someone approaching him. But when that person sees his condition, instead of helping, they quickly leave. Ish only catches a snippet of a strange phrase, "The sun still rises as usual." Ish vaguely sees a helicopter flying above the trees. Even though he realizes something is happening, he's completely unable to sit up. At this moment, Ish's mother, who hasn't contacted him in a while, suddenly sends a text message that seems like a goodbye. When thirst strikes, Ish finally manages to crawl up to get some water. But this bottle is empty. Ish can only muster the strength to crawl off the bed to reach for another bottle of water. The extreme hunger and thirst prevent him from even passing up the spilled drops of water. Luckily, Ish finally snaps out of his delirium. Without his phone, he has no idea how much time has passed, only knowing that he wasn't killed by the poison, and the wound on his hand has completely healed. Intense hunger quickly sets in, and Ish decides to drive to town to find some food. But what surprises him is that his car is covered in a thick layer of dust. Without thinking too much, he quickly cleans off the car and drives straight to town. However, as soon as he reaches the edge of town, Ish immediately notices something strange. The usually bustling streets are now completely deserted. Arriving at the supermarket, he finds stuff scattered all over the road as if someone dropped them and didn't have time to pick them up. And when he sees a dead body on the ground, he's overcome with a deep sense of unease. Judging from the state of the body and the flies buzzing around it, it seems like this person has been dead for quite some time. Although he doesn't know what happened, the horrific scene around him suggests that this place has gone through a terrible event. Just then, Ish spots a sign warning of a virus outbreak. It says for everyone to seek shelter in a safe place. He quickly drives as fast as he can to his parents' house. On the way, through a radio broadcast, he learns that he's been in a coma for 3 weeks. During that time, a virus outbreak ravaged the world. Not only is it extremely contagious, but the mortality rate is also incredibly high, quickly spreading across the globe. The government advises survivors to head to safe shelters. It doesn't take long for Ish to finally arrive home. Seeing leftover food on the table, he prays that his parents are okay. But when he enters the bedroom, the horrifying sight of his father pulls him back to reality. Ish chokes up, sobbing. Unable to look for long, he turns and walks towards the bathroom. There, he finds his mother had also collapsed beside the toilet. The sudden shock leaves Ish in agonizing pain. He never imagined that after just a long sleep, his two most beloved people would be gone. After calming down, he decides to bury his parents in the garden they loved the most. From a young age, Ish was used to living independently on his own, but it's only now that he truly feels this terrifying silence. He hopes to find other survivors like himself, so he begins searching the entire town. But, to Ish's disappointment, everywhere he goes, he only finds more and more bodies. Not giving up, he decides to head to the big city. Entering a supermarket, he grabs some essential supplies to survive. But this time, getting free stuff doesn't bring any joy. He walks along the highway, and as he approaches a bridge, he finds the road is blocked. In front of him are bodies scattered all over the ground. Ish screams frantically to release the fear in his heart. He slaps himself hard, trying to convince himself that everything happening is just a nightmare. However, the real pain reminds Ish that the apocalypse has truly arrived. Even so, Ish still believes that there must be other survivors, so he decides to head to Las Vegas. But to his despair, the once bustling casino city, filled with throngs of people, is now eerily silent. Even though the backup power system is still keeping the city running, the scene has a strange, indescribable vibe. Ish angrily shouts, "I don't want to give up hope," but the only response is dead silence. After searching for a while with no luck, Ish accepts his fate and lies down in a luxurious hot tub, thinking about what he should do next. Then he decides to let himself go, taking off all his clothes and wandering around everywhere. When he arrived at the bar, he poured himself a glass of the most expensive whiskey. But just as Ish was about to take a sip, a voice suddenly spoke up. The unexpected sound startled Ish. Right after, two survivors stepped out in front of him. Ish quickly and awkwardly covered his body. Through the news video that the other two had recorded, Ish finally understood the reason why the apocalypse happened. As it turns out, as soon as the virus broke out, the government immediately took countermeasures. However, the vaccine they researched had absolutely no effect, but they still claimed to have achieved a breakthrough and hid this truth from the public. They secretly buried those who died from the virus, but they ignored its strong ability to spread. When humanity realized it, it was already too late. This led to the catastrophic extinction. Luckily, the woman and the old man survived alongside him. Mitch suggests that all three of them might be immune to the virus. Even so, the three of them now have nowhere to go. He proposes that instead of worrying, they should enjoy their remaining time here, drinking and having fun. However, Ish doesn't agree with the other two. He leaves, wanting to find a quiet place to think. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, Ish realizes that he himself doesn't know what to do next. He eventually falls asleep again in the hallway. When he wakes up, Ish immediately goes to find the two people he met last night, fearing it was just a hallucination. Luckily, he finds Lisa in the dressing room, but realizes that she seems to have lost all hope of living. Mitch has prepared a thoughtful breakfast for them, and then all three eat and drink together happily. Mitch says that this disaster is probably Earth's way of cleansing itself, because the footprint humanity left behind was too heavy. Lisa choked up, saying that her loved ones all died from the virus. Mitch shares the same fate. They thought they were the only two people left on Earth, so they befriended each other to comfort one another. Now, with Ish joining them, they're very happy. However, Ish doesn't plan to stay here with them forever. He wants to go out and search for more hope. Hearing this, Lisa sadly walks out. Mitch tries to convince Ish to stay, explaining that he might be the very reason Lisa wants to keep living. He reveals that the two of them had previously discussed ending their lives when the food here ran out. Ish objects, saying that the outside world is vast, and resources are abundant enough for them to live another 10 years. But Mitch replies that when you've lost everything that matters most, living isn't necessarily better than death. Saying this, he gets up and leaves. Ish then goes to Lisa and invites her to leave with him, but Lisa just smiles. She has seen her two children pass away with her own eyes. Her heart died with them. Understanding their determination, Ish leaves the building alone. Right after, he hears two gunshots, and the whole world falls silent again. Ish completely breaks down. In his despair, he floors the gas pedal, deciding to end his life by driving off at full speed. But just then, a small dog suddenly appears, making Ish change his mind. Seeing the dog surviving just like him, Ish suddenly feels a reason to keep living. He immediately names the dog Lucky and takes him into the car. With no specific goal in mind, Ish decides to return to where it all began. But before heading back, he stops by the town's library, gathering all the materials related to survival skills. He then returns to the house that gives him a sense of warmth. From then on, Ish and the dog begin a new life. However, loneliness eventually wears a person down. A year passes by in the blink of an eye, with Ish constantly repeating the same tasks as the day before. When boredom strikes, he just drives around the yard to kill time. Just when Ish thinks he can't take it anymore, the usually gentle dog suddenly barks loudly. He's surprised to see a thin wisp of cooking smoke rising in the distance. Although the distance didn't seem too far from afar, Ish still drove for a long time to get there. As everyone knows, in a post-apocalyptic world, you need a good weapon. However, the only thing Ish brought with him is a small hoe. Standing still there, a woman with a rifle is standing on the roof. Ish quickly explains that he hasn't seen people in a long time, and came here just to check if anyone else is alive. The woman, showing empathy, puts down her weapon and leads Ish into her house. Through their conversation, Ish learns that her name is Emma. Since she was young, she has lived by hunting in the mountains, which is how she luckily survived when the pandemic broke out. In recent years, she has wandered everywhere searching for her kind. But unfortunately, she hasn't seen any sign of another human being. Recently, she just arrived in this area and isn't yet familiar with the environment. And unexpectedly, she met Ish, who came to visit. After hearing the woman's story, Ish suggests that she move in with him. That way, at least they'd have someone to take care of each other. Perhaps because she hasn't met a man in a long time. Emma's face even shows a hint of shyness. The next morning, Emma packs up all her belongings and decides to move in with Ish. This small town is where Ish grew up, so he's familiar with every nook and cranny. The two quickly arrive at Ish's old house. The clean house makes Emma full of praise. Ish seems to have grasped a new life force. He goes inside, cuts down the rope, and thinks to himself that he won't need to use it anymore. Right after, they check the remaining survival resources, but the food in the refrigerator is long past its expiration date. Then, Ish leads Emma to the supermarket in town. This place can meet any of their needs. Ish is engrossed in searching for food, while Emma carefully selects some medicine. It's worth mentioning that the bodies in the supermarket haven't seemed to fully decompose yet. Even though it's been a year, the stench is still incredibly strong. Just then, Ish excitedly says that he's discovered something new. It turns out there are still solar panels in the supermarket. Emma jokes, "How about we move in here?" She feels like this supermarket was built specifically for the post-apocalyptic world. Ish says that he'll move the solar panels back to the house later, because in the current world, electricity and water have long since stopped being supplied. He and Emma begin to discuss the disaster. From their observations so far, it seems like all of humanity has died out. However, all other animal species have survived. With the absence of human noise, some animals are even strolling down the streets. Ish says that maybe they're like these animals, having a special type of immune antibody in their genes. Recalling the time he was bitten by a venomous snake, he guesses this might be the reason he survived. In the following days, the two begin to live a life as if on a pristine island. Ish also starts researching how to install the solar panels. Sometimes they even go to the riverbank to fish to improve their meals. Before long, his labor of love finally begins construction. Emma has also managed to grow precious rows of vegetables in the yard. Time gradually passes, and the relationship between the two becomes closer and closer, until a spark of love ignites in their eyes. After a passionate night together, Ish, whose body hasn't been active in years, feels exhausted. The next morning, the two happily gaze out at the view, looking like a couple deeply in love. Before you know it, half a year has passed. That day, Emma excitedly shares some good news. It turns out she's pregnant with Ish's child. Hearing this, instead of being happy, Ish's expression turned heavy. No hospital, no doctors, and now, no safety. The feeling of helplessness engulfed Ish. In grief, he worried that if Emma encountered any complications during childbirth, the rest of his life would be more painful than death. Ish had already lost his most beloved parents, and he didn't want to lose any more loved ones. Even so, they both understood that giving birth to the child was the motivation for them to keep living. They had to find a way for the child to be born safely. After discussing it, they decide to go to the town's library to find books on delivering babies. It turns out Ish was once a geologist. His learning ability is enough to master the knowledge from the books. Afterward, the two go on a free shopping spree for some supplies related to childbirth. They meticulously prepare for every little detail because, without a doctor, everything is very dangerous. Before long, Emma's belly grows bigger and bigger. The food in the house is no longer enough to provide her with nutrition. The menu now needs to include meat to supplement protein, helping the mother's body reach its best condition. The clever Ish quickly comes up with a solution. He takes the hunting rifle to a nearby farm and finds a herd of cattle grazing. Since this is his first time hunting an animal at close range, Ish has to muster all his courage to pull the trigger. But when faced with such a huge creature, he doesn't know where to start to get its meat. Luckily, he brought along a book that details how to butcher livestock. When he returns home, Emma praises Ish's efforts. Once again, she witnesses his growth in the post-apocalyptic world. However, the two could never have imagined that this hunt would bring about a disaster. The next day, Ish finally finished installing the solar panels after half a year of research. They successfully activate the electrical appliances in the house. Right then, Emma spots a rat in the kitchen. It's unusually large, which reminds them of the cow that was just killed. Ish immediately realizes that the rats must have caught the scent of the beef. That night, the whole town echoes with strange rustling sounds. It seems like a force is sweeping through the streets. Before long, the dog's barking comes from outside. Ish looks through the window and sees a horrifying sight. Outside, it's swarming with rats coming from all directions. Ish quickly burns all the rice and flour in the house, and also takes the uneaten beef outside to dispose of it. Emma tried using the hunting rifle to scare off the rats that were getting close, but it was useless. The long-tailed hamsters were showing up in bigger and bigger numbers, forcing the two to retreat into the room. Ish found a roll of duct tape to seal up the windows, hoping to temporarily stop this intense onslaught. Just then, the dog's pained yelps are heard from outside. It turns out they forgot to bring him inside. With no other choice, Ish has to remove the duct tape, open the door, and rush out to save the dog. It's during that brief moment of opening the door that more than 10 large rats rush into the house. Ish and Emma are forced to struggle all night, fighting off the rats to hold out. The next morning, the rats retreated. The fat, slow-moving rats that couldn't escape in time became breakfast for some cats. It seemed like the basic ecosystem was still in balance. Seeing this, Ish let out a sigh of relief. A few months later, the time for Emma to give birth had arrived. However, fate once again teased them with a terrible event. The baby's arm got stuck in the pelvic bone. If they couldn't adjust the baby's position in time, both Emma and the child would be in grave danger. Delivering a baby for the first time, Ish was extremely worried. He had to follow the instructions in the book, boldly reaching in to adjust the baby's position. After all their efforts, finally, the first baby of the post-apocalyptic world was born. Their happiness after all the hardship moved them deeply, but they still couldn't help but worry about the future. The two gave their daughter a very special name, meaning that she would become the hope of humanity in the future. Afterward, Emma left a message in the town center. The content was the detailed address of where they were living. Not long after, a stranger showed up in town. He quickly spotted the message Emma had left. The time came to the 6th year since the pandemic outbreak. That day, Ish was on his way back home after gathering food, when he unfortunately hit something on the road. When he got out to check, he was shocked to find it was a lion. It looked like it was about to die, so Ish decided to end its suffering. Just then, he heard a noise from the nearby bushes. Ish looked up and saw a strange girl. Without hesitation, he immediately ran after her. After all, this was the first survivor he had seen in many years. He quickly caught up to the girl. She didn't say a word, just stared at Ish warily, as if she was afraid he would pull out a gun and aim at her at any moment. To put her at ease, Ish kept his distance and assured her he meant no harm. He even offered to provide food and shelter. Perhaps because she had gone through some terrible memories, the girl ultimately refused his help and turned to leave. Ish disappointedly returned to his vehicle, but was surprised to find the lion's body was gone. This situation made him feel uneasy. Could it be that some other animal had dragged the body away? He got back in his vehicle and cautiously scanned his surroundings, starting to worry about the girl's safety. Luckily, the girl emerged from the woods right then. Ish tossed her an apple. In the post-apocalyptic world, nothing is more valuable than food, and this action seemed to lower her guard. Though she didn't say anything, she climbed into the back of the truck. Clearly, she had silently accepted Ish's help. When they got home, Ish's wife was teaching their two mischievous kids. It seems like over the years, they had created new life. Looking at Emma's big belly, it wasn't hard to guess that Ish's third child was about to be born. At this point, the girl was still hiding in the back of the truck, refusing to come out. Her eyes had returned to that wary state. Ish showed understanding of the girl's feelings. He gently introduced the members of his family, then told her to stay in the truck and observe a bit more if she didn't feel safe yet. After returning to the room, Ish told his wife everything that had happened that day. He figured the girl might have gone through something horrific, causing her to show signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. This answer got agreement from Jorge, a survivor who had come to the town a few years earlier. While the two were talking, Jorge's wife walked in. She curiously asked about where the girl was staying now, seeming worried about whether she was okay outside in the truck. By nightfall, the girl was still curled up in the back of the truck, refusing to come out. The group looked at the situation, unsure of what to do. They could only sit beside the truck and try to comfort the girl until late at night. The next morning, Maureen brought some food to try and coax the girl, but unexpectedly, her reaction was extremely intense. During the struggle, the girl's arm was exposed, revealing burn marks that looked like signs of abuse. Maureen quickly understood the issue and showed the girl similar scars on her chest. She said that she had also gone through similar things, so she could understand the fear and anxiety in the girl's heart. With Maureen's patient persuasion, the girl finally accepted this new home. Maureen then led her into a room and prepared a hot bath for her to wash up. While the girl was bathing, Maureen opened the backpack the girl was carrying, wanting to learn more about her. The first thing Maureen took out was a very strange notebook. The content inside was so disturbing that it made Maureen feel a chill. At the same time, Ish led Jorge back to the road he had traveled earlier. With his cautious nature, he wanted to clarify the girl's identity. They quickly discovered a wooden house hidden deep in the forest. Inside, there were many signs that someone had lived there. However, what shocked them were the grim, disturbing pictures plastered all over the walls. Ish didn't stay long and hastily left the forest. That evening, Maureen told everyone about her discoveries. She had also found a letter in the girl's backpack. The writer claimed to be the girl's mother. She said her daughter's name was Evie. Before the apocalypse, they were a happy family. But after the pandemic broke out, the husband became very cruel, often taking his anger out on his daughter. The mother knew she was dying and couldn't protect her daughter anymore. She hoped whoever found the letter would treat Evie well. Hearing these words, Everyone present felt a pang of sorrow. A few months later, Ish's third child was finally born. This time, it was a healthy baby boy. Ish named the child Joey, hoping he would always find joy in life. Emma's genes were very strong. All three of her children had dark skin. Another year passed, and the alarm system around the house suddenly went off. Ish quickly told Maureen to take the kids to their room, while he and the others grabbed their weapons to go check it out. Emma saw a figure flash by, but just as she was about to take aim, someone shouted loudly, telling her to stop. Just then, 3 people appeared in front of them. They explained that a little boy had gotten lost and accidentally triggered the alarm that Ish had set up. Right then, the boys safely returned to their side. After a brief standoff, both sides realized there was no ill will, so Ish invited them back to his house. In the apocalypse, the most terrifying thing is other people. Therefore, Ish had to make sure that these newcomers were safe. The woman leading the group was named Molly. She said she was a surgeon in Washington. When the apocalypse happened, the people around her gradually died from infection. She had to leave the city because she had no other choice. Later, she met the couple sitting behind her, and the boy who got lost was also their son. They came here because they saw the notice in the town center. After hearing this, Ish still didn't offer his opinion. He was no longer the only survivor of the pandemic. He had to worry about the safety of everyone here. Maureen then asked if they could stay. Emma immediately agreed. After Maureen and the others left, Ish sighed that his wife's directions should be erased. Clearly, it had attracted survivors and brought a potential threat. Ish felt that in the post-apocalyptic world, keeping silent was the safest way, and any action that could expose their location should be avoided. The next morning, Ish held a brief meeting with everyone. Currently, there were 7 adults and 5 children in the whole compound, so they had to go to town to gather more supplies. After all, the increase in people would put a strain on their reserves. Besides Emma, who stayed home to take care of the children, the remaining 6 people would split into groups to go scavenging. The things they needed to find included canned food, solar panels, and some hygiene products that wouldn't expire. Also, they hadn't entered the town in the past 6 months. Currently, there were many wild animals roaming there, so everyone had to be extremely cautious. About 10 minutes later, a group of people drove 3 vehicles to the designated location. Here, they were surprised to see a water buffalo. Ish explained that this buffalo had always been here. It wasn't aggressive, and just stood still in one spot. Hearing this, everyone laughed cheerfully, not thinking anything more of it. They quickly went to search around the stores. Ish leads the men to a convenience store. Even though it's been 7 years, there are still some usable items here. Meanwhile, Molly decides to go it alone. She sneaks off to a nearby hospital and starts searching meticulously. As a surgeon, she knows medical supplies are way more crucial than food. Suddenly, she finds a locked room. Molly immediately thought that this must be the medicine storage room. But while she's trying to get in, a wolf pup appears, and the atmosphere instantly gets tense. Maureen calmly reaches for a fire extinguisher, then aims it at the wolf to scare it off. Leaving the hospital, Molly returns with a bag full of medicine. Ish sees this and rushes over, clearly upset about what she did. But when he finds out she scored a ton of medicine, he's shocked. Molly explains that every hospital has a backup pharmacy, meant to be used in case of a robbery. Seeing this, Ish praised her. That evening, everyone sat together happily, chatting and laughing. This atmosphere really didn't feel like the end of the world. Perhaps they had all experienced the pain of loss. Therefore, they cherished this moment more than ever. Not long after, Maureen gave birth to a child, which deeply moved her husband, Jorge. He felt not only lucky to become a father again, but also incredibly grateful to have a friend like Ish. Also, the couple who came with Molly had their baby too, so her son now had a new friend. Time flew by, and it was now year 14 since the outbreak. Those babies born back then were almost as tall as adults now. The marks of time were visible on Ish's face. Even though fate had been kind to the survivors here, aging was always present and never far away. That day, Ish took his youngest son to the library. As always, he taught his son about the world. Joey was smart and always paid close attention when learning. Suddenly, Ish heard thunder outside the window. It turned out the annual storm had arrived. On the drive back home, the rain got heavier and heavier. Stepping inside, Ish suddenly realized the dog wasn't there. He rushed back outside to find it. However, after searching every corner of the house, Ish witnessed a scene he never wanted to see. His loyal friend, who was like a family member, had been crushed to death by a large tree. It had been with Ish for the past 14 years, but no one expected such a tragic end. Perhaps because Lucky was gone, Ish's luck had run out too. The next day, As Ish was watching his youngest son play, a mountain lion suddenly emerged from the grass. Seeing his son in danger, Ish immediately jumped in front of the mountain lion to block it. It instantly started attacking Ish ferociously. Ish tried to reach for the hammer that had fallen to fight back, but the powerful attack gave him no chance to react. In just a few seconds, Ish completely lost consciousness. Fortunately, thanks to Molly's quick treatment and the antibiotics found at the hospital earlier, Ish was pulled back from the brink of death. However, after everyone left, Molly broke down in tears and apologized to Ish. Meanwhile, to avenge her husband, Emma took her shotgun and headed into the park alone. The area was still stained with Ish's blood. Following the mountain lion's tracks, she entered the dense forest and finally came face to face with the beast that nearly took her husband's life. Without hesitation, she pulled the trigger, avenging Ish. Not long after, Ish woke up in bed. Molly decided to confess the truth. She wasn't a doctor. In fact, Molly had spent a year in medical school, but dropped out. Not because she wasn't doing well, but for personal reasons. After the apocalypse, when all the real doctors had passed away, she was forced to live a lie in order to survive. Under immense pressure to save Ish, Molly realized she couldn't pretend anymore. She decided to come clean and face her past. In year 17 after the apocalypse, Ish and Emma's eldest daughter was now in a relationship with Rafe, the son of Ezra and Jean. The two of them loved to go out to the city to hang out, and through old photos, they learned how beautiful and colorful the outside world once was. Longing to explore the world, Penelope and Rafe planned an epic journey together. They joked that Ish was the inspiration behind this adventure. Penelope promised she'd be back before winter. After much convincing from Emma, Ish finally agreed to let his daughter go. Both families pitched in, gathering all the survival gear Penelope and Rafe would need for their expedition. Everyone threw a warm, send-off party to wish the two good luck. Not long after Penelope and Rafe left, the community faced a new challenge. The water in their pipe system dried up, causing the vegetables in the garden to wither badly. Ish and a few others went to check the dam upstream. They discovered that the water there had completely dried up too, and even the water pipes were rusty and cracked. As the group was trying to figure out a solution, they were surprised to see a few cars driving by on the road above the dam. Joey was stoked, figuring they could get some help, maybe even make some new friends. But Ish was super cautious. He quickly pulled Joey back to their vehicle, ignoring the calls from the people they saw. Ish was worried that if those people had bad intentions, they'd be in trouble since they were outnumbered. Not long after, the group of people found their way to them. Leading the pack was a guy named Charlie, who quickly picked up on the water shortage situation. Luckily, Charlie revealed that among their gear, they had a well drilling kit, and they could help Ish solve this problem. Over dinner, both groups gave a quick intro about themselves, and made a pretty good first impression. True to his word, after the meal, Charlie got straight to work, drilling a well right in the backyard. Since he didn't have any experience in this area, Ish could only stand by and let Charlie's team do their thing. After that, they both went hunting in the woods. With his solid experience, Charlie quickly took down a small deer. When Ish admitted he wasn't good at butchering, Charlie responded with a cryptic comment that he was very skilled at it. Not just with deer, but even with big animals, like bison. Noticing the guarded look in Ish's eyes, Charlie burst out laughing and said he was just kidding. After a hearty dinner, Charlie started talking about his views. In this post-apocalyptic world, he believed there were only two types of people, the strong and the weak. He figured the weak had to be conquered by the strong to survive, but Ish didn't see eye to eye on that. This seemed to disappoint Charlie, and he mentioned they weren't on the same page. That's when Ish noticed something off in the way Charlie was looking at Evie. He immediately shared his worries with the family, but Emma thought he was just overthinking it. She insisted that it was only natural, given Evie's beauty. They gotta admit, Charlie had this leadership vibe and a knack for getting people around him pumped up. It was that charisma that made his whole crew willingly follow him. Even Ish's two sons started looking up to Charlie. A few days later, the well that Charlie and his team dug was finally finished. When the crystal clear water gushed out, the whole community was over the moon. But when Ish stepped up to thank Charlie for the help, Charlie suddenly put his arm around him and dropped a loaded statement, saying, "I've realized recently that I really like it here." Ish felt like things were slowly spiraling out of control. All the love and trust from his family now seemed overshadowed by Charlie's charm. Ish turned and walked away. Feeling heavy-hearted, Charlie's eyes flashed with a menacing look, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, after the party wrapped up, Ish heard a woman's scream coming from Evie's small house. He rushed in to check things out and found Charlie strolling out of the room, a smug look on his face, holding a belt. One of his buddies was standing guard outside. Ish burst in and saw Evie sobbing. It was clear that Charlie had forced himself on her. Meanwhile, Charlie returned to his vehicle with the swagger of a conqueror. Confident that fully taking over Ish's group was just a matter of time, he even started planning his moves for the next day, to seize the place and do whatever he wanted. But Charlie didn't know that Ish had already gathered his family to come up with a plan. Maureen, who always thought of Evie like a daughter, couldn't shed any tears when she heard the story. Choked up, she said that Charlie was a predator. He went from place to place, looking for new prey. Even Jean, who was hesitant at first, started to admit that Ish had been right about Charlie all along, but they had no idea how to deal with him. Ish reminded them that they had to figure out a plan tonight. Charlie wasn't hiding his true, awful self anymore. Finally, it was the homeowner who spoke up. Emma said they had to kill him to get justice for Evie and everyone else there. When the topic of murder came up, everyone started arguing again. Ish suggested they take a vote. Ezra thought it would be a secret ballot, but Ish said everyone had to face each other and vote openly. The decision had to be unanimous, not a single no vote allowed. Emma insisted this was the only way to deal with this crisis. Jin was the first to speak his mind, saying he didn't want his kid to go through this kind of humiliation. They had to kill that bastard. When it was Jorge's turn, he still couldn't make up his mind. Maureen quickly tried to convince her husband, and everyone around started getting agitated. Ish, carrying a hammer, went straight up and knocked on Charlie's trailer door. Charlie came out holding a knife, declaring he'd been through hell and back, and wasn't afraid of anything. But Ish just wanted to demand that he leave this place. Unexpectedly, Charlie brazenly declared that the only way he was leaving was to go with Ish's wife to visit Ish's grave. He said the weak should be buried in the ground, and when that happened, he'd take care of Ish's 2 sons. Seeing that he showed zero remorse, Ish called his buddies over, weapons in hand. Charlie, still cocky, started mocking Ish, saying that real men don't need to drag their families into a fight. But before he could even finish his laugh, the hammer in Ish's hand smashed into the left side of his face. Charlie, totally caught off guard, became Ish's punching bag. This was Ish's first time killing someone in this post-apocalyptic world. The next morning, the people who came with Charlie noticed he wasn't there and realized what had happened. Max, one of Charlie's loyal guys, wanted to fight back and get justice for him, but he found that everyone else there chose to stay silent. Before, they had only followed Charlie because they were forced to, but now they liked the peaceful life there. Facing gun muzzles and betrayal from his crew, Max had no choice but to leave alone. However, Ish was still worried. He felt like they were letting a tiger go back to the mountains, and he didn't know if Max would come back for revenge. Not long after, Max drove back, saying he was also a victim of Charlie and had nowhere else to go, begging Ish for a chance. Ish recalls the time he stood guard over Charlie's bestial behavior, wondering if he felt any pity when he heard Evie's cries for help. Max throws down his weapon, showing remorse, but Ish doesn't want any bad apples in his community. Max drives away, marking the end of this dispute, but Ish is unaware that another life-threatening danger is silently approaching them. By the 20 years since the apocalypse, the community where Ish lives has found a peaceful life. Even his youngest son has grown up and successfully built a solar-powered airplane. Joey's dream was to become a pilot. One night, Joey suddenly felt freezing cold. Ish and Emma thought it was just a mild cold, so they didn't pay much attention. That was until their son, drenched in sweat, walked into their room, called out to them a few times, and then collapsed to the floor. Ish rushed off to find Dr. Molly for help, but found out she was busy treating another patient and was told to stay away. Molly explained that this was a similar situation to what happened in Ashland before. People were constantly getting high fevers. No matter who they were, this disease was highly contagious. Even those who survived due to immunity to the virus couldn't escape it. It was then that Ish realized his youngest son was facing death. Molly even suspected that this was a variant of the virus that caused the apocalypse. That very night, many more people became infected. Molly alone couldn't handle all the work, so she needed everyone there to form a team to take turns caring for the sick. Looking at the blueprints that were his son's dream, Ish felt heartbroken. Not long after, Penelope returned home from her journey. Seeing her 2 children embracing each other in tears, Ish felt he needed to do something. He drove to the big bridge leading into the city. After cutting through the fence blocking the way, he grabbed a bicycle and headed in. Ish didn't know if all of this was a consequence of him killing people, just hoping he could find medicine to treat the virus. It had been 20 years since the apocalypse, and the once bustling cities had become ruins. Trees were growing all over the buildings, Ish's target was a large hospital in the city center. He had heard from Molly before that hospitals usually have backup medicine storage. After searching for a while, he finally found some medicine. Ish used a hammer to smash the glass of the cabinet, ready to grab the bag and go. But he found he couldn't pull it up. The bag was stuck under Charlie's foot. It turned out this was just a hallucination after Ish had killed someone. As Ish was about to leave the hospital, he passed by a confessional booth and saw a statue of God inside. Ish started to pray. For the first time in 20 years, he began to think about the meaning of life for survivors like them. After returning home, Penelope recounted what happened after she and Rafe left. They drove north, not seeing any other survivors along the way. A few weeks later, they reached a beautiful beach and decided to set up camp there. Ultimately, the two broke their promise by not returning before winter, continuing their journey along the coast instead. Every coastal town they passed through was deserted, with no sign of people. In each place they went, they always discovered something interesting. On the walls and ground in some towns, there were writings along with arrows pointing in a certain direction. But every time they followed the arrows, they didn't find any other survivors. They figured maybe those people had left a long time ago. After that, the two settled on a coastal hill where they could enjoy the stunning ocean view every day. But one day, something unexpected happened. Penelope came across a grimy man in the woods. The moment he saw her, he took off running. Penelope went back and told Rafe what happened, but she never imagined that the man had secretly been watching and followed them back to their camp. He subdued Rafe and forced Penelope to hand over their food. She said they were on their way to find other survivors and were willing to share their food with him. But Rafe tried to fight back and ended up getting stabbed. Right after, Penelope used an axe to kill the attacker, but she still lost the person she loved forever. After burying Rafe, Penelope decided to head back, but the car broke down on the way. Penelope had to walk for weeks to finally get home. In another development, Joey's high fever didn't let up. Ish had to put him in an ice bath to bring down the temperature. A few days later, Molly tried using cypress leaves as a treatment, and it initially showed some positive results. This disease was believed to be another variant of the previous apocalyptic virus, but it wasn't as dangerous. However, this treatment method didn't work for everyone. The man in Charlie's group was very grateful for Molly and Penelope's help. When he learned what happened to Rafe, he asked about the attacker's appearance. Penelope replied that the guy looked very dirty and she couldn't see his face clearly, but he had a gold tattoo on his arm. At this point, the man realized that the person who attacked them was Max, who they had previously kicked out. Facing his lifesaver, he asked if she had ever kept a secret that she couldn't tell anyone. This reminded Molly of her fake doctor identity. She said that if the secret could make the world a better place, keep it, otherwise, shout it from the rooftops for everyone to hear. After Ish's efforts, Joey finally passed away. Losing his son, Ish still rushed to town, wiping out all the drawings that directed survivors to their houses. Thanks to Emma's comfort, Ish gradually overcame the pain of losing his son. He realized that the creatures once driven away by humans were returning to their habitats. The urban ruins were covered by nature, and the river was gradually becoming clear again. Everything on Earth seemed to be slowly recovering when no longer disturbed by humans. One day, while cleaning up Joey's belongings, Ish discovers a notebook. When he opened it, he found that Joey had recorded some of his inventions. He always knew his father didn't want too many strangers coming here because of safety concerns, but he had a different view. Joey believed that humans were not meant to live alone. He hoped to build a radio station to try to contact more survivors around the world. To fulfill his son's wish, Ish gathered everyone to take action together. They erected an antenna and assembled a simple radio device. However, they tried broadcasting on many different channels without receiving any response. One day, when everyone was playing a game, Penelope suddenly recalled the meaningless numbers and arrows in the coastal towns they visited before. This gave Ish an idea. He tried using the frequency corresponding to those numbers to communicate. Sure enough, they received a response. On the other end, there were 77 survivors, currently living on a beach in a national park, about 100 kilometers away. For years they have lived a nomadic life, but when asked if they could meet, everyone fell silent once again. The woman on the radio said that she understood the fear of strangers very well. When they decided to increase the radio frequency, some people also objected. In the post-apocalyptic setting, Ish's inner self also gradually changed. He began to search for hope amidst despair. Gradually, he realized that, although humanity had been destroyed, it was still possible to find the meaning of existence in this desolation. Time goes by. 50 years after the apocalypse, Ish has become an old man with silver hair. He passed on his hammer to his second son. After all these years, Ish has understood a truth: Humans are merely guests on Earth, not its masters. Every change in nature demonstrates the Earth's resilience and infinite adaptability. No matter how influential humans may be, they are just a fleeting moment in the long history of this planet. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you again. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any exciting videos.